Hello everyone, this is my off-the-cuff first impressions and kind of rambling, I guess, on what I thought of X-Men Apocalypse. I just saw this movie a couple of days ago, and I'm recording it now because I've been kind of under the weather, so excuse any disturbances that may be related to that. But anyway, so this is kind of the like the fourth big superhero movie release that has come out this year in 2016. You know, Captain America: Civil War that's a tough act to follow, and I've been watching some reviews of this. I've watched a couple of reviews, many actually, and it's been kind of mediocre reviews, getting kind of mixed reviews. I think that this is probably, one of the more interesting movies to discuss because this movie gets a number of things right, and there's quite a bit of interesting things in this movie, but there are also some problems. There's going to be spoilers in this thing, by the way, but overall, I liked the movie. I found it very entertaining. Maybe it was just because I was in the right headspace for it. I've been kind of on a superhero kick lately, so I thought it was a lot of fun. And there were a number of things that I wanted from this movie that I thought would be interesting to see. And what those were I wanted to see some good Cyclops and Jean Grey. Those are two characters that are popular among the X-Men fans, and I'm not really an X-Men fan. I've read a significant amount, not really, I guess, maybe not a significant amount, but I have read quite a bit of X-Men comics, but not super recently. In preparation for this movie and for the other superhero movies, I had been reading some comics about the characters, like I did that for Captain America: Civil War, and Batman v Superman, and I didn't really read any comics to prepare for Deadpool, but I did just happen to be reading some comic books around the time before Deadpool came out anyway, that I was just interested in, but I didn't pick them out with the intention of preparing for that movie, which I should talk about Deadpool in this thing a little bit also. I guess I'll just talk about it right now. I'm getting off track a little bit, but that was a really fun movie, and I was really impressed with that. It was a great, faithful to the source material, straight off the page Deadpool adaptation to the big screen, and I think that is that the way that movie is the right way to do a Deadpool movie, and it really captured the spirit of the character, and it seemed, just watching the actors and the script, it seemed like there was a lot of enthusiasm for that, and for that character in particular, and I really enjoyed it. There's some great comedic actors in that movie, like Ryan Reynolds and T.J. Miller. They were really funny because of just their timing and their jokes. The humor landed for me. I understand that it's not everyone's bag. Not everyone thinks that the humor that's in that movie is very funny, and I'm not a huge fan of the Deadpool humor in the comics, but I just thought that the actors in the movie added a lot to it. And also it was a good script, too. There was a lot that that movie did right. They made fun of previous movies, bad superhero movies, which was great, and then there was also that surprisingly believable and interesting romance that Deadpool had between his wife, and his wife was, a good character as well, who had, traits and was sympathetic, not just attacked on love interest for the main character. But anyway, what was I talking about? Cyclops and Jean Grey, I think, and how comic fans like them, but I haven't really been able to, or I don't really know that much about them. So I was hoping that this movie would exhibit some of the things that X-Men fans like about Cyclops and Jean Grey. And I've read some X-Men comics in the past, as I've said, but it's been a while, and I don't really remember what kind of people Cyclops and Jean Grey are. Then I also wanted to see good Wolverine in this movie. I wanted to see some fun with Wolverine, and he's in this movie. It's been criticized. He has a cameo in this movie, which has been criticized of being tacked on and heavily contrived in order to fit into the movie. And I shouldn't really talk much about how this movie's plot was structured and what is contrived or convenient, or what makes sense or not, because this movie it's a bit complex in structure. I don't know if convoluted is the right word, but it jumps around a lot between different characters, so it wasn't the easiest thing to keep track of, because there's a lot of different things going on between different people at different times in the movie. And also, when I saw this movie, it was the end of the day, so I was a little bit less aware and a little tired. So I could be missing some important details, but also I don't want to get too upset, just because this movie was not as good as the best movies in this franchise. I don't think it's worth getting upset about, because that's not a whole lot of fun to do that. And I don't really care, because we've had some good movies already in this X-Men franchise, and there's good comics, so we've seen that they can do some good work, and they do good stuff in this movie. I thought the characters were sympathetic, so I am willing to overlook some of those maybe plot holes or problems in the script, just because I don't really want to get upset and ruin my enjoyment of the film. But anyway, and that was kind of my thought process with Batman v Superman, but that movie is a lot worse, and I don't really necessarily feel like I need to see this movie again. Maybe if I get some time in a couple of weeks, just to go and see and try to look for the problems in the plot structure. But I don't really think so. I don't feel like I need to. Before going into this movie, some more preparation that I took was I wanted to watch some of the previous X-Men movies. So I watched X-Men First Class, and then I wanted to watch X-Men Days of Future Past, but I didn't get around to it. I didn't have the time to do that. And a lot of people say that that's the best X-Men movie, that or Days of Future Past. And I remember being really impressed with Days of Future Past the first time I saw it, but I've only seen that movie once. It's been 2 years, so I don't remember all the details super well of that from that movie. And X-Men First Class, I watched it about a year ago also, rewatched it, and I thought it was very good back then, and I enjoyed it a whole lot then. But then this time, and maybe it's because it's coming off of Captain America Civil War, and my standards were a little higher, but I didn't enjoy it as much. I think it's a well-crafted script. It's coherent, and the characters are sympathetic as well, but I find them sympathetic. But I found it a little bit of a typical X-Men story, or just kind of not necessarily X-Men, but just kind of a typical superhero story. Basically, my favorite part of that movie was the end when Magneto and Professor X are arguing on the beach, about how they think mutants should coexist with humans in the world, and I find that really interesting. That's my favorite scene in the movie, and I wish just those ideas were a little more spread out throughout the whole film. Like you've got a little bit of that, and you've got some imagery that illustrates that. Like you've got Professor X and Magneto like sitting on opposite sides of a chessboard, and they're playing chess, which is supposed to represent that idea and their argument. But I wish their argument was subtly integrated throughout the script a little more. Because for the most part, that movie is Magneto's revenge story and Professor X putting together the X-Men, which is kind of cool, but not as impressive as I seem to remember it being. And then the other thing that I wanted to see was some good Magneto, which also I was satisfied with what we got in this movie. So I guess other things that I should talk about. Yeah, there are a lot of characters in this movie, a lot of new ones, and one thing that I was surprised by is how emotionally connected I felt, at least on my first viewing, to these characters. Maybe it's in part to the good acting, but they seem like sympathetic people. Like Professor X, he's in an interesting spot at the beginning of this movie, because he now has a school put together for mutants, and he's trying to get that going, and that I thought was pretty neat to see a main character in kind of that headmaster and teacher role. You know, you basically got a school full of superheroes, or not really superheroes, but super powered people, and how he's trying to improve society by imparting his knowledge upon these mutants. And I thought that was just a cool place for Professor X to be in. What other characters did I like a lot? Well, with Cyclops and Jean Grey, at first I was worried that they would kind of be unlikable characters. Like Cyclops is kind of a little reckless at the beginning, and I'm not sure if that's how he is in the comic book. I don't remember. From what I remember him being kind of goody two shoes, kind of Boy Scoutish, at least from the early comics. But I don't remember him being as kind of reckless as he kind of seemed to be in this movie. And I don't really remember very much at all about Jean Grey, because she's not always around. She's not around as much as Cyclops is in the comics, because the whole Phoenix thing. Anyway, I thought that she, at the beginning, she was written kind of unlikably. I thought like she would like bump into Cyclops, and she like drops her books, and then she is mad at Cyclops, who has a blindfold on because he should watch where he's going, but he can't watch where he's going because he's blindfolded. That's just like one of those places where the dialogue wasn't as smooth. Like it's not a big deal in terms of like it changes events in the plot, but it makes your characters unlikable potentially. However, by the end of the movie, they'd gone to some more interesting places with those characters. Cyclops, a little less. We just have some more screen time with him, kind of doing more things. And I thought that by the end of the movie, he had, he kind of done a little bit of leadership, I guess, or like, he'd taken charge a little with some kids at the school, getting them together, going off campus, that kind of deal. But Jean Grey, she tapped into the Phoenix Force at the end of the movie, or I don't know what it's called. I think it's called the Phoenix Force, or she taps into Phoenix at the end of the movie in order to help Professor X defeat Apocalypse. And I thought that was really cool, because they messed up the Phoenix saga, or the culmination of the Phoenix saga. I don't know what it's called. I'll just call it, they messed up the Phoenix storyline in X-Men 3. But I'm all for anyone taking a crack at an idea as many times until they get it right. So I'm fine with seeing, I'd like to see the Phoenix done right. I know there's other interesting stories that could be done, but I think that's an important one, and one that I personally would like to see more than like some of the other X-Men stories. Like, I guess, I don't know, off the top of my head, other X-Men stories that might be cool to see would be like Onslaught, and I don't remember any other ones off the top of my head. I was thinking of some earlier, but I can't remember them right now. Maybe I will remember them as I go on. There's Old Man Logan, which we're getting. One thing that I like is that they're bringing more like classic comic book costumes of the X-Men into the movies. Like, the leather jumpsuits, those are actually in the comic books. They're, I think, Grant Morrison's run. I don't know if that was before or after the movie. And I don't know if that movie was basing those black leather jumpsuits on anything, but I think it's really cool to see these, like Chris Claremont era X-Men style costumes on the big screen and in this franchise. I was super excited when I saw those costumes at the end. Like, you got to see some of that stuff in action. Like, I thought the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, I thought their costumes were very cool looking. Psylocke in particular, her costume is very straight off the page, and the actress who plays her, she looks similar to how Psylocke looks in the comics. So I thought that was really cool. Anyway, as far as the continuity goes with this movie, I'm not sure how well it links up to everything because I haven't rewatched Days of Future Past, so I don't remember how that would line up with the new continuity. Some other things that I thought were interesting: Magneto, he ends this movie in an interesting place. Him and Mystique end this movie in an interesting place, in how they're kind of friendly with the X-Men. That's that's uncommon because they're generally conflicting with the X-Men in the comics and in the other movies. I don't know if I completely buy where they get to by the end of this movie, but I think that it's a neat idea, and that for the next movie, Magneto doesn't necessarily have to be the villain, because in pretty much all the previous X-Men movies, I think Magneto has been the villain or a villain in it. So it might be a neat idea to not have Magneto as a villain, maybe not even have him in it. Now, actually, I would like to see Magneto in it because I'm a fan of Magneto, and I like Michael Fassbender. He's the actor that plays Magneto. I like him quite a bit. But the X-Men has a ton of different villains. Like Mr. Sinister might be cool to see at some point. Onslaught might be cool to see. I don't know what else. There's a lot of different X-Men stuff. Maybe something cosmic, like some aliens or something, like the Shi'ar. And I think Fox has the rights to the Skrulls, which they aren't really X-Men villains, but they do have the rights to the Skrulls, and that might be cool to see. I don't know. Just ideas. So I don't know, this ramble's been kind of all over the place, but I guess what I'd like to see going forward from Cyclops is just his his ideology. I think that would be kind of neat to see, because I'm not really sure what it is. I don't know if it's an interesting ideology, but usually since he's a leader type character, they generally do have some sort of interesting ideology that I think would be important to show off in the future movies. So let's talk about Apocalypse a little bit. I thought he was pretty cool. I love that opening scene of the camera is kind of just panning around that desert. I thought that looked really beautiful. And then it kind of zooms in on that ceremony with the pharaohs in ancient Egypt. And that looked really cool to me. And when I saw that, I was engaged right away. Some people I've heard in reviews didn't get invested until like halfway through the movie, but I was in on this right away. Maybe it was just the mood I was in. Maybe it was the right headspace. But I thought that was very, very beautiful. I think the movie introduces an interesting idea for a villain in Apocalypse. Like a god of the mutants, or a god of the population. God, he's above the humans and above the mutants. And I also think he's kind of an interesting extension of Magneto. Now, I've heard this in other reviews, and I agree with it, that Apocalypse, you don't really get an argument from him for why he's destroying the world. They establish who he is at the beginning of the movie, and then he collects the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse and wrecks the earth. So I've heard other people call him kind of like he's kind of a monster of the week villain, but I don't know if I would. I guess that I don't really want to say that, but I guess that kind of is how he is written. But the actor Oscar Isaac, who also played Poe Dameron in Star Wars: The Force Awakens, he acted. He was the actor for Apocalypse, and he does a really good job. He's very menacing. It's a very different performance than Poe Dameron. So I think this actor, he has a lot of range, and that's a sign of a good actor. Now, also, what I thought was this movie did well. Now, I don't know if it's this movie doing this well or if it's just my response to it, but when Apocalypse is destroying the Earth and he's destroying that city, I felt emotionally invested in it, and I thought that it was sad that that city was being destroyed. Now, maybe it was because of the good acting, but I think they spent enough time with the human characters, and they spent a good amount of time before getting to this action to build it up, and I thought there was enough stakes within the X-Men just from their conversations prior to Apocalypse's destruction. So not every character gets their moment in the spotlight, like in Captain America: Civil War, and I don't really mind. I think that it's possible to get each kind of more prominent X-Men in this movie to have a unique voice and have interesting ideas, but I don't think it is a problem for the movie if that's not there, because they at least kind of illustrate that world of mutants, that there's a lot of them, and you can do stuff with them later, moving forward. So they're not shafted, but sometimes just nothing is done with them, and I think that doesn't really bother me. Anyway, I think I should be wrapping this ramble up. I've been doing this for a while, but some things that I think are worth discussing before ending this is why I like the X-Men separate from the other Marvel characters, because the X-Men, they kind of have even in the comics, they're kind of a universe of their own. It doesn't really make sense, like, it's a plot hole in the comics, like why, the general public would hate mutants, and they would hate Cyclops and Angel and Beast, but not hate like Spider-Man, because, you know, how would they know that Spider-Man isn't a mutant? Anyway, so as far as the future of these X-Men movies go, I think they've got good actors, they've got good new actors from you know, who they've chosen as Cyclops and Jean Grey and Storm, even though Storm didn't really get very much to do. I mean, she was a horseman of the apocalypse, but it didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Maybe I need to see it again. Also, like, I don't know how how he convinces the horsemen to work with him. Like, some of the characters, it makes sense. Like Magneto, it makes sense for why he'd want to work with Apocalypse. I'm not sure. It was unclear if Apocalypse used mind control on the Horsemen. Now, I don't know. Maybe I need to see this movie again. This is just a question that I have. But yeah, it seemed a little strange that without mind control, Storm would want to side with Apocalypse and destroy the Earth. So going forward, I think they have a good cast. I think if they get a good and enthusiastic creative team who's competent with this at making movies and telling stories, then I think they're in good hands. And if they make movies about X-Men storylines and the characters that the fans want to see and are excited about, then I think they'll be in good shape going forward. I also would really enjoy seeing like some more X-Men spin-off movies, like they kind of did with Deadpool. Like, we're getting a Gambit movie in the future, which I think would be a cool idea, just to make a movie about one particular character and really make that character interesting and sympathetic. So then when you see him appear in like a tentpole movie like the X-Men with a whole lot of characters, then you'll have a little more investment and interest in him. Also, could we get a Wolverine cameo in Avengers Infinity War? I think that would be really cool. Hugh Jackman, he wants to do it. The folks at Marvel want to do it. I don't know if the folks at Fox want to do that. They'd have to work out some kind of deal so they get paid for it. But that would be really cool. Like, it could be easy to explain, since you've got the Infinity Gems, just the reality gem does something, rips a hole in reality, Wolverine shows up because of that, and just have him there for a little bit, just so we see him, maybe he fights a little, then he gets sent back to the X-Men universe. That would just be awesome to see. And Hugh Jackman, he's gonna stop playing Wolverine after Wolverine 3, the third Wolverine movie. I don't know if they'll recast Wolverine. They might wait a little bit. I hope they wait a little bit, because it'd just be kind of weird to see another guy as Wolverine right away. But speaking of Wolverine, I've recently read Wolverine comics, so I'm kind of a little more interested in Wolverine. And what they did show of Wolverine in this movie, even if it was contrived, I did have a lot of fun with it. I thought that, the Weapon X looked more comic accurate than in the previous movies. Like, he had that whole apparatus on his head. And Wolverine, it looks more savage than ever. It's just like an animal running around that compound and, killing things very brutally, which I think that's foreshadowing Wolverine 3's kind of R-rated violence, which I think that's going to be unique to see, and that might be interesting. So anyway, I think that's pretty much all I have to say on this movie. This has been a little more off-topic and rambly than some of my previous, first impression rambles, but these are just off the cuff. I mean, I have some notes to help remind me, but thanks for listening, and if you liked this, then go check out my other stuff. There might be something you like there.